is this season's baby. You can see the adaptations for living under the ground. You can see the long fingernails they use for digging. You can see the ears that are back against the head so they can keep dirt from going into their ears.
So how old would you say this one is?
This is born in May, so how old does that make him? And let's see if he's a girl or a boy. It's a little girl.
5 months?
Yeah, 5 months old.
What's your name?
My name is Lynn Huff.
Okay. And what are you doing out here today?
Well, we're here to humanely relocate the prairie dogs that are on a construction site.
Uh-huh.
The construction is planned for the softball field, the girls' softball field here in Taos, and I understand it's scheduled to begin tomorrow. So we've been given 3 days in which to try to remove as many prairie dogs as we can.
And what kind of a method are you using?
Well, there are 2 humane methods that can be used, only 2. One we're using today because of the shortage of time, and that's a soap bubble removal method. What we do is we use water and soap that's put into a pressurized tank, and we put that at the mouth of the burrows. The bubbles fill up the burrows. The prairie dogs come to the surface, and we meet them with our bare hands, pull them to safety, put them in a carrier, put saline solution in their eyes so that their eyes won't burn, dry them off, and try to keep them together by family group through the whole process.
And how effective is this technique?
Well, usually you can get about 80% with this bubble technique. The other technique, the live trapping technique, is usually required to pick up stragglers, and there always are stragglers. It's a time-consuming process. It requires that you watch traps for a number of days, but it's very effective. We just finished a project in Santa Fe where we got the last prairie dog after a couple of months of work.
Why relocate?
Prairie dogs are candidates for the endangered species list. Doesn't seem like there are that few because we live in an area blessed by many, many prairie dogs. But the truth is that they've been extirpated or removed from their range, their original range, and they're down to something less than 5% of their original numbers. So by relocating prairie dogs and reestablishing them in a protected area, you give the species a chance to reestablish itself. And there are several other species that live in the burrows or feed on the prairie dogs that will go extinct if the prairie dog goes extinct. And so I think the number is of approximately 200 mammals and reptiles and birds who live on prairie dog colonies. They are the keystone species of this ecosystem. And they're very valuable, very intelligent creatures who've been given a bad reputation by a lot of mythology on the part of people who would like to see them removed from the face of the earth.
Well, some people might argue about the concept of the term mythology when it comes to prairie dogs.
Let's argue.
Because some people say that prairie dogs are a nuisance, that they carry diseases, that they create hazards in prairie dog towns where there are a lot of holes in the ground, that horses can be hurt in pastures.
I can rebut every one of those. Yes. In the first place, prairie dogs do not carry diseases. The disease that people most frequently speak about and have a lot of fear around is plague. That is something that was introduced to this country by Europeans. It's not native. Prairie dogs have no immune reaction to that at all. If a carnivores carry the plague flea, not prairie dogs. If a carnivore brings the flea into the colony, prairie dogs get sick, go down into their burrows, and die within a few days. They don't travel around sick carrying any kind of parasite. They die. The coyotes, the domestic dogs and cats that also go across prairie dog colonies do carry the flea. But the prairie dog is maligned in that regard because they don't live long enough to be good vectors. A good vector for a disease has to live and spread the disease. They don't do that. So the other myths that you talked about, prairie dogs have been around for thousands of years, long before humans ever lived on this continent. So the fact that we've chosen to build human settlements over prairie dogs, it's not really the prairie dog's fault. The fact that we've created the nuisance, we could choose our building spots in consideration of the wildlife that inhabits these places and not destroy other species' homes. But we choose to build in places where it's attractive and seems suitable to us. We don't think about those things. I hope the day will come when we do. But prairie dogs were here first. And The thing about the horses lived with buffalo, with antelope, horses. Prairie dogs lived with buffalo, antelope, horses, other grazing animals. They lived in great numbers all over the Great Plains. They created the Great Plains with these animals. The prairie dogs create a fertile landscape by bringing air, fertilizer, and water and vibration down into the earth. And when we remove the prairie dog from areas like this, in 25 years it becomes desert. So they do contribute a lot. And with the prairie dogs goes the other life that I was talking about, the birds, the salamanders, the hawks, the coyotes, the other creatures, badgers, who live on that land. Is there another, so nuisance, I guess it depends on how you define nuisance. I think we're pretty much a nuisance to the prairie dog. They seem to live where we live. Here in Taos there seem to be a lot of them, but that's because we're not actively trying to destroy them. We seem to live in some kind of synergy with them, and it's a very nice thing. In other places there's a more aggressive policy for extirpation.
And so what are you doing with the prairie dogs that you catch?
The prairie dogs that I catch will be held in quarantine for a while, just to make sure that they're in good condition. We have access to veterinarians who take care of them if there's any problem. We don't anticipate a problem, but we do want to make sure that we have healthy prairie dogs that we're releasing into the ecosystem. And there are 3 or 4 conservation ranches where we will be taking them. One of those will be taking these prairie dogs to. It's unfortunate that this is rather late in the season. Prairie dogs are hibernating animals, and this is September 11th. And so we're running against the clock. We have to work quickly to get them released. But preparing habitat for them is the next step. We have to go out and prepare burrows that are underground, artificial burrows. They have tubing that goes to the surface. We release the prairie dogs into the tubing. We monitor them. We feed them. It's an extremely time-consuming process, but the analogy I use is a baseball analogy. I imagine when you're dealing with an endangered species that you're holding up a baseball net in a tornado, and you're hoping to catch a few individuals before they're all whirled out of existence, which could very well happen in our lifetime.
What's going to happen to these prairie dogs if you didn't come in to do this?
Construction would probably start, and a prairie dog's reaction to danger is not to run on the surface, it's to go down and hunker down. They have many chambers. They have some that are very deep, could be 12 feet underground, and they'll go down into those chambers with their families, just like we would, and they'll huddle together. The lucky ones will be suffocated because the burrows will collapse when the vibration from the machine starts. Mm-hmm. The unlucky ones who are caught on the surface or in an intermediate burrow when the construction begins could be physically injured and killed.
Why are you doing this yourself?
Well, I'm doing it because I've come to know a lot about prairie dogs over the last 12 years. I moved to New Mexico from Texas and was charmed by prairie dogs. I was not here for that purpose, for the purpose of saving them, but the more I got to know them and the more I came to understand the difficulties and challenges they face, the more I realized that they need help. And it's an opportunity I have to give the skills that I have acquired to the prairie dogs. Prairie dogs are they're the least of the least, the meekest of the meek, the ones with the least protection. There are a lot of people who are organizing around a lot of other species, but prairie dogs don't have a great support group. Mm-hmm. And it seemed, and also because they're extremely interesting creatures. They have a language of over 500 words that's been studied and documented. They're clean, they're friendly, they're responsive, they're fascinating to be around, and I find them very worthwhile. So why these creatures? Other people might choose elephants or sharks or I don't know what. Prairie dogs are here and I'm here.
What would you recommend someone who has what they might term a prairie dog problem? What would you recommend they do?
Well, if they would like help with anyone would like help with prairie dogs, they can call People for Native Ecosystems in Santa Fe, and let's see, 505-982-0496, or they can call Wild Earth Guardians. I don't have their number, They can call the Taos Prairie Dog Coalition, which is just now forming, and people are starting to get involved. And the sooner we develop a group in Taos that can stand up for prairie dogs and speak for them, the better. They could also call, let's see, they could call me. My number is 575-758-7008. And if I can't help, I can refer them to someone who can.